Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Mark and I thank you so much for coming by today. I want to jump right into this discussion about watercolor pencils and a question that I'm asked frequently by young artists and students, which is, what's the point of watercolor pencils? Why do I need these things and what are they good for? Well, we'll get into that discussion in just a minute, but first I wanted to share with you the actual watercolor pencils that I keep in my own art supply kit and how they're good for me and how I acquired them and what they're good for, really. So the first one is the Loew Cornell, and I believe I spelled Loew Cornell wrong, and I apologize for that. But the first one is this one. It's a very beginner grade. It's not even quite a student grade pencil, and I acquired that years ago when I was first looking for these products, until I got my hands on the REEVE'S. They were given to me as a gift, and I started using those and never went back to the Loew Cornell. They kind of sit in the bottom of my art supply kit. But the REEVE'S, they did me a lot of good and I really enjoyed working with them. They're a student grade pencil and they were great for what they were. A few years later, I went out and I made the investment into Derwent watercolor pencils and I was really, really happy with the result. They have a great pigment payout. They are an artist grade pencil or a professional grade pencil, and they did exactly what I was hoping they were going to do. Now, with the Prismacolors, I bought those about 2 or 3 years ago, and I really, really expected these to act like Prismacolor regular colored pencils, and I was kind of hoping they would, but I wasn't sure. Well, when I first started using them, I was really pleasantly surprised. They reacted very, very much like regular Prismacolor pencils, but as you'll see here, you can use these pencils as colored pencils, blending and doing all the things you can do with colored pencils. But the true magic happens when you add water to them. And that's the point of a watercolor pencil. But why is that so great? Well, it adds a new dimension to your artwork that you didn't have previously with just colored pencils. And it also adds a dimension, if you're just using watercolor, to use colored pencil on top of it. So it's kind of a cross between both, and they're really a fun product to try out if you've never tried them. Now, the student grade products, there's not a high pigment payout. With the more artist grade and professional grade, like the Derwent and Prismacolor, there's a lot more pigment in these, and they're a lot more satisfying, but they are a lot more expensive. So I'll clean up this chart. You can see them side by side, and let's get into this discussion more right after this coffee break. So the question remains, what is the point of watercolor pencils? Do you really need them? And what do you do with them once you get them? Well, there's many, many uses for watercolor pencils. The most straightforward being using them like regular colored pencils for drawing, sketching, and even blending, but then activating the pigment with water later. Here I'm using a couple of swatches to create a watercolor painting to the side here. And I love to create a whole swatch card using all the colored pencils that I have, and then using water later to create watercolor paintings. You can even give a swatch card to your friend who's never tried these pencils before, and it's a great way to share and see how other people respond to these watercolor pencils. Here I'm using the side of the watercolor pencil to get a grainier sort of pastel-y effect, and then I take a little spray bottle and I'll spray right on top of the sketch to draw out the pigment and create a really soft effect. It's really nice. And if you want, you can go back in with your brush and just draw out the watercolor effect even more. Another use I love to do is to take an X-Acto blade and actually chip away little bits off the tip of the pencil to get the pigment into a puddle of water and create a nice effect before or after your watercolor painting. Another effect you can use is using a wet paintbrush on the tip of the pencil and drawing off the pigment that way. I also like to use water to flick off the tip of the pencil and create a nice little spatter effect, which is a really cool after effect when you've done a watercolor painting or even before you start doing a watercolor painting. And so you can see here, there's a lot of different ways to use watercolor pencils. Many ways I haven't even figured out yet. So if you have ways that you use watercolor pencils in your own artwork, please share it down below in the comments. I would love to learn from you new techniques in my own artwork that I can use to enhance my experience with watercolor pencils. Now, going back to the what's the point of watercolor pencils? Well, for me, there's 4 major points. The first point is to have fun. To have fun and explore your creativity and use a product that you may have never tried before, or maybe you bought it and just kind of forgot about it. So maybe it's time to pull those watercolor pencils back out, give them a try, and see what you can do with them. The second point is the control I get. I love the control I get when I'm doing a full drawing and I can turn that drawing into a watercolor painting. It's such a satisfying experience and the results can usually be pretty amazing. The third point is I love the portability of watercolor pencils. I can just pick up a limited palette of pencils, just pick and choose a couple of pencils here, some Prussian blue, some yellow ochre, and maybe some burnt sienna, and I can just take them on the run with me without having brushes or water or anything, and bring a sketchbook, and I can just do a drawing and not have to worry about anything else. These are so transportable that I love carrying them around in just a small kit or even just with me within my sketchbook. And the fourth point is, I love the fact that I can create a fully realized drawing or sketch and keep it in a sketchbook for a day, 2 days, a week, a month, whatever, and I don't have to paint it right away, but that I can come back to it much later, add the water, get that pigment activated, and see a whole new experience from a drawing that I did months ago or weeks ago. That's a great feeling when you can come back to a piece and re-immerse yourself into it. Now, of course, the beginning of my watercolor pencil career was not very glamorous at all, and it wasn't very satisfying either. I originally bought these Loew Cornell pencils because I was looking to get into watercolor painting, but watercolor supplies were so expensive. I was familiar with colored pencils, and I thought these would be the same, except you could use water with them. Unfortunately, these are a beginner grade set, they're very inexpensive, and they have a really low pigment payout. So I was very disappointed and eventually just buried these in the bottom of my art supply kit. So when someone gave me these REEVE'S pencils as a gift, I thought, okay, I'll give these a try and see if I can just recharge my interest in watercolor pencils. I kind of gave up on them. Well, I'm glad I didn't, and I'm glad I tried these because these renewed my faith in watercolor pencils, and I actually had a really good time using them. Don't get me wrong, they're still a student grade pencil. They have a very low to medium pigment payout, and the core of the pencil, it's a water-soluble pigment. It's very hard and very chalky, and it gets a little scratchy when you're putting it on paper. Now, that's not a bad thing because it's just a student-grade pencil at work here. But what I did love about these is that the pencil design itself felt really good in my hand, and with a little bit of pressure, you could actually get a lot of pigment paying out on the page. And that was the big thing for me, was just to get as much pigment out as I could to make these vibrant. So when you're putting these down, that hard core gets a little bit scratchy and you can have some markings left behind if you push down too hard when you add water. But when you do add water, the color was really surprising. I was really happy with that, and it really pops off the page. Now, when you let this dry, you can actually go back over it and add more color using other pencils or different colors, and you can glaze over it the way you can with watercolors and get more colors to pop off. So these were really good, and I encourage anybody looking for an introduction to watercolor pencils. These are a great place to start if you don't have the money especially. However, there are higher grade pencils out there that you can try that I haven't tried myself. For example, the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer, the Caran d'Arche, and the Derwent Inktense pencils are all options that are out there that I haven't tried yet, and I'd love to try them. But for me, I made the investment into these Derwent regular watercolored pencils, and these were promoted as a professional grade pencil. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make this investment. I really want to see what these things can do, and I was really, really pleased with how these worked. Now, they still have that sort of chalky, dry feeling when you lay them down. The core of the pencil is a little bit chalky, but it's very soft, and it was easy to blend these. They didn't feel like a colored pencil, which is what I was seeking out and really wanted to find, but the laydown was really nice. It had a lot of pigment to it, and I could really work with these. And the best thing about these was they weren't super expensive, but they weren't cheap either. I love the way they blend, and lightfast information is available online. I'll put a link to that chart down in the comments below. But once I added water to these pencils, I was really impressed with how the colors just popped and how vibrant they were. Really nice colors, and you can see the color just pops out when you add water to it. And the great thing is, once it dries, you can add more color to it and glaze it, and it looks really great. So a couple of years ago, I decided to make the jump into the Prismacolor watercolor pencils. I had used Prismacolor colored pencils for years, and what can I say? They just lay down really well. The wax in the regular pencils are very soft, and you can blend them very, very easily. That's what I expected from these watercolor pencils too. Prismacolor really surprised me, and they delivered exactly what I was hoping for. The core of the pencil is really soft, and you can blend these really well. This was the closest pencil I could find to a true colored pencil, but yet it had the watercolor capacity. You can see that the yellow is very vibrant, and all the colors go down really smooth and clean without a lot of pressure either. They're very soft core. They also have a lightfast chart online, and I'll put that link below too. And these are considered artist grade pencils. So I got exactly what I was hoping for, and they look beautiful when you add the water to it. You can see here the pigment is really strong. In fact, maybe a little too strong. And what I mean by that is it's something that you need to be aware of when you're putting the pencil down, that you could be putting down too much of an intense color. So you really have to work with these and get some practice in with these pencils, because they're really intense, and I really, really like that. So that's an option for me. And anybody who's looking to get into the field of watercolor pencils, again, remember those points that I made before, and remember that watercolor pencils are all about fun and exploring your creativity. And that's what I love about all 4 of these watercolor pencils. It was a learning experience for each one. The Loew Cornell is for the beginner grade, the REEVE'S student grade, and the Derwent and Prismacolor. They really pop off the page, and I really enjoyed all of them. Anyway, I thank you so much for watching this video today. I hope this was helpful for you, and maybe it was an introduction to check out some watercolor pencils for yourself. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'd love to bring you more content like this. Again, thank you so much for watching, and God bless.